Here we go again with part 3, and hopefully we can nail it down with this so we can get on to the mark of the beast. Now in the beginning, these kings, presidents, and prime ministers, whenever they visited the Godfather, they always bowed, kissed his ring, honoring him, calling him Holy Father every 2 minutes. But when the Pope visits them, they still do the same, showing you who is in charge. Oh yeah, and the black suits, investigate that, and the funny handshakes as well. I guess it's like the old days when the popes openly ruled the world. These days they just do it, they hide it in plain sight. In the medieval days, they wore black as well, like this gentleman. I guess he knew his place. And here are the world ambassadors, the Pope addressing the United Nations. The EU, forget it. The flag was a direct design by a priest from this picture. Truly, all roads lead to Rome.
It's been watching all this with Washington. Like Keith Miller, Tim's had his share of terrific moments with Pope John Paul II over the years. And Tim, just as I asked George Weigel a while back, what is it you believe we've witnessed here today?
Brian, we've witnessed the definition of inspiration. We saw the 5 kings, 4 queens, 70 presidents and prime ministers sit for over 2 hours and observe and witness a life that was lived to the fullest, a life of meaning, a life of purpose. We heard the letter of St. Paul about full citizenship in heaven. These world leaders were unattended for 2 hours. They didn't have the press of their daily burdens. And my sense is that their own thoughts turn inward as to their own lives and what they need to do in order to make this world a better place.
Pay my respects and condolences on behalf of all of us for the Holy Father, who was a man of peace, a man of compassion, a man who has had an enormous impact on the world, and also for people of faith, someone who showed how one can walk with the Lord in all phases of life.
Even if you're not a Catholic, even if you're not a Christian, in fact, even if you have no religious faith at all, what people could see in Pope John Paul was a man of true and profound spiritual faith. A shining example of what that faith should mean. And to anyone who ever met him, as I was fortunate enough to do,
the general public was halted before Bush was escorted inside the basilica. As many as 600,000 people a day are being hustled quickly past John Paul's remains, and the line waiting outside was more than a mile long. Javier Salinas, Associated Press.
Who are praying for the Holy Father. The outpouring of love and concern from so many, including millions of Americans, is a testimony to his greatness.
And if you look at what happened in 1989 and 1990 and 1991, you cannot but help recognize the tremendous contribution of Pope John Paul II to those dramatic events and therefore to freedom. And he didn't stop there. He has continued to be a voice for those who are oppressed, for those who are seeking.
The world had seen John Paul II face down oppression, help end the Cold War. But it was not until years after communism fell that details emerged about the drama that had taken place behind the scenes. Journalist Carl Bernstein wrote about that part of the story in 1996.
We now have the missing pieces of the puzzle of how communism fell, because the Pope's role has always been what's missing. This is a man who has marked his time, who has marked our era.
It's a portrait of Pope John Paul II you've never seen before, perhaps never even imagined. A religious leader playing a pivotal role in the political struggle of the century.
The great story of our time is the fall of communism, and the central player who hastened the demise of the fall of communism is this Pope from Poland.
Pulitzer Prize-winning Watergate reporter Carl Bernstein says what he and co-author Marco Politi discovered and detail in their new book about the Pope surprised even him.
If anybody would have told me 10 years ago that I would be sitting here across from you and saying that the Pope of Rome was one of the most important figures of the second part of the 20th century, I'd say you're smoking something. This is astonishing.
What's astonishing is what Bernstein calls an intelligence shuttle that developed between the Pope, President Reagan, and the CIA. Some of the world's most sensitive secrets shared in a holy alliance that would topple communism and win the Cold War. It all started before Ronald Reagan was even elected. As he watched the first papal visit to Warsaw ever allowed in 4 decades of communist rule, Reagan would tell a close aide that Poland is where the Iron Curtain would crack.
June 2nd, 1979, the Pope makes his triumphant return to Poland. You say in California the television set is on.
It is. Biggest anti-communist crowd in the post-war era erupts. And Reagan dissolves in tears and turns to Dick Allen, and the two of them say there's now a metastasis in the body of communism.
A cancer.
A cancer. This Pope.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
When Ronald Reagan took office in 1981, the Solidarity movement, which would mount unprecedented challenges to the repressive communist regime in Poland, was still in its infancy. Both the Pope and the President wanted desperately to keep it alive.
As you know, Your Holiness.
And by the time they first met in 1982, the two men had something else in common. They had both survived assassination attempts just weeks apart.
Reagan said to the Pope, I believe we were saved by Providence for this special mission.
Bernstein says Reagan made a private pledge to step up secret U.S. aid to Solidarity, eventually totaling some $50 million. But there was more. Reagan also offered the Pope a series of secret briefings by William Casey, head of the CIA, a devout Catholic who briefed, then prayed with the Pope.
It sounds extraordinary. The Pope conferring with a U.S. spy master?
Absolutely.
Where do these meetings take place?
In the Pope's private office. The Pope on one side in a high-back chair, Casey across from him.
And Bernstein says there were as many as 15 secret sessions between the Pope and Director Casey or former Deputy CIA Director Vernon Walters.
They gave each other information. All of the analysis of the CIA went to the Pope. All of the Pope's analysis went to the CIA in the White House.
Richard Allen was President Reagan's first national security advisor.
It did, in my judgment, constitute the most important secret alliance of all times.
Having survived an assassin's bullet and having read communism its final rites, Bernstein says this Pope from Poland will long be remembered, not only as a man of God, but as the secret shepherd of a political revolution that reshaped the modern world.